Hey, this is Taylor from Count, and in this video we are going to be talking all about ad hoc requests, and in particular how the Count canvas can help you and your team address these requests faster and more effectively. So let's go ahead and get started. So with this scenario here, so today for this video, we are going to be looking at a question that we just got asked. Let's say somebody in Slack said, hey Taylor, can you just answer this question for us? How long do customers normally wait between the first and second order? Now, before I start answering this, I just want to point out something that might be kind of obvious or seem kind of trivial, but this simple act of having our question in the same environment as we're about to have our SQL query, where we're trying to solve it, and having these two things side by side is incredibly powerful. Oftentimes, these requests aren't as simple as a sentence or a simple question. They usually have maybe certain customer IDs they want you to look at. Maybe they have a screenshot of another tool that they're looking at and they're trying to reconcile a couple different things. You can put all that context right here next to where you're actually going to be trying to find the answer, which just makes it so much easier than having to flip back and forth between different threads and all that kind of stuff. You can stay focused on the problem at hand. So on that front, let's get into some data. Now, in this case, like most ad hoc requests, I'm not going to start from scratch, but I'm actually going to start from a query that I already have that's kind of similar to this. So we see we've got a query here, and so we've got a lot of what's being asked for, but we have the last order date instead of the second order date. So we've got the kind of entire time a customer's been a user. So this is the query we need to modify. And I could try to modify it in here, but one of the powerful things about working with SQL in the canvas is that I can take a complex query like this and I can break it down into its component parts. So again, what that did is it took all those CTEs that I had in that query, broke it down into cells, and as you can see, these cells are connected as a DAG so that we can see how these CTEs, how their logic is connected. So this means it's easier for me to make sense of this query and identify what's the part that I need to change. This is the part I need to change. And it means I can tweak it here and make sure I'm tweaking it correctly while staying in the larger context of this query that we're working with. So like I said, in this case, instead of last order, we want the second order. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to change this window function and change the sort here, and maybe I'll call this, keep that, change that second date. And I want to change this to be second order. And it's going to ask me if I want to update the references to this cell because I've changed the name of it, which I do. And now we can just check this first and see if this looks right. There's probably a lot of clients that haven't had a second date, so that makes sense. And in our join here, we still have a couple column names. We'll just update that. And there we go. We've got our query ready to go. So we have enough at this point to answer the question at a high level, which is just the average of this column here. So I can just quickly make a visual. Let's say I want to change this to just be a big number, and I want the average here. And there we go. I'll probably make this a little bit smaller, change the styling. And we could pause here. One of the nice things is we could pause here, and depending on our stakeholder, we could invite them into this canvas and say, hey, look, I have an initial answer to your question that you asked. I'm sure you have some follow-up questions, but do you want to work through them together? Because at this point, you have most of the data that you need. So if they've got some questions, you could maybe spend a half an hour together talking through it and getting to the heart of it, or you could do a little bit more work and send some stuff to them a little bit later. In this case, I can probably guess some questions that they might have from this. So I might just do a little bit more before sending this over to our requester. In particular, I was looking at this segment column here. So we have a couple different segments. So if we look at this, transactions, we can see what segments we have just by pulling that in. So we have two segments, SMB and enterprise. And so maybe we can look at this and how this changes by these different segments. So we need to modify this query again so that we can get these segments in there. Now again, this is just really quick, adding a column. So I can do that, and you can see my cells are reacting. And update my join. And there we go. And now I can just copy and paste this. And I can add filters here to say I want the segment to be SMB. And here I want the segment to be enterprise. Got a title. So this is kind of starting to take shape. I've got, the stories becoming a little bit clearer. So we have big discrepancies between our two groups of people. And maybe we want to do just a little bit more digging here. So I might make it another visual and I'm going to start with an area plot. And I kind of just want to see how this distribution kind of plays out across these different segments. So I'm just going to take client IDs here. And I might even go by segment them out, 2 different rows. And I'll probably color by segment here. Now, as you can see, we're kind of losing. There's a lot of outliers here, and that's not really helping me see the whole trend. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce this down to what we care about. Now, again, it looks like there's a lot more SMB people than enterprise people, so that's kind of giving us some noise. So one of the things we can do is we can normalize this. I'm just going to normalize this, and I'll do pane across. Okay, so now we've got percentages here, and this is a slightly different story now. So we've got this kind of jump here for enterprise people at around 1 day between order that the SMB people don't have. So that's pretty interesting. So I'm probably going to call this out and say, looks interesting. Let's chat. And let's just make a little arrow here. And again, for an ad hoc request, I'm probably going to keep it pretty simple in terms of design and layout because ad hoc requests are probably going to change until you get to kind of final output and you decide maybe you want to do something else. But for this case, I'm just going to keep it a sticky note and an arrow so that it's really clear what I'm trying to say here. And again, maybe I'll even talk it over with them in person as we work through this. So at this point, we've got an initial answer here, and maybe I'll even just put this together into a frame. Now, if I wanted to, I could hide this frame. So if I did want to invite a stakeholder in, and I thought if I had loads of queries here and I didn't want to distract them, I can hide this away and have them, we can just focus on this. And then when they ask some follow-up questions, I can come in here and we can take a closer look at it. But at a high level, at this point, I think we're ready to bring in our requester. Now, if we get to a point where we kind of finalize this and we want to do something else with this, we've gotten to the end of our ad hoc request, maybe we want to turn it into something else, there's a few ways we can finish this off. So one is a presentation step. So one is if we wanted to share some of these findings. We have these templates over here, which basically let you transition into like a nice layout of how you want to tell your story. This simple insight one is one of my favorite ones. It's just so simple. And maybe I just want to share this graph. I think it's really important. And maybe give it a title and a narrative. And then this becomes something, again, I can share in report mode like this. If I want to share it, if it ends up going kind of in a deck or other people want to take a look at it, I can go ahead and put it in there. Now, the next way we can kind of export this and use it again for later is not just presenting what we found, but also saving the logic. So let's say I want to save this cell, maybe as a view in our database. We decide this is important. For some reason, we want to do it. We can copy the compiled SQL out. And what that does is it will copy, again, back into CTEs like we started. And that means you can easily save it as a DBT model. You could save it into your database as a view. You could save it in GitHub as a query that you guys, as your team cares about. Whatever it is, you now have this logic. And of course, it will exist in this canvas, but it means you can save it into wherever else your data team keeps your queries. So that is a really quick introduction to ad hoc requests. I recommend you checking out some of the other tutorials. There's a lot on data exploration and data storytelling that is around ad hoc requests. So if you had some follow-up questions more on presentation or modeling or any of that kind of stuff, check out some of the other tutorial videos. We go into more depth around those different areas. But yeah, that's it for now. So then, bye.